What's up? How you doing? Here we are, a beautiful day today. Extremely hot, very dry. I could feel the heat elevating from the ground up. Like the sun is bouncing the rays off of the ground, and I could feel it. Feel it here all over the place. You know what I wish I had right now? Besides a cold beverage? I'm interested in buying a mule. Fascinated with mules. The strength, the endurance. You know, I'd like to get a mule, have it in the backyard. Not for small walks, but you know, you want to go deep into a canyon, you get a mule, a nice big mule. And mules are huge. You know, you think of a mule, it's not a donkey. You know, it's not a horse, but it's not a donkey. You go to the Grand Canyon, and I do visit the mules in the back there. They're all female, by the way. I don't know, there's probably something with the temperament. You know, they're probably a lot better than, you know, calmer than the males are. But yeah, only thing with a mule is you can't reproduce a mule with a mule normally. But strong animals. Yeah, I'd like to get one of those. It's not getting one that's the problem. It's the maintenance, the storage place where you have to go and keep it. We have a few places not too far from us, but you know, you have to be very proactive. You can't forget about the mule for a couple of months and then go visit. It's like a daily thing. Of course, you get people there that can feed it for you if you're not around, but you know, a lot of work with a mule. So very nice today. I've been walking around here. Sometimes when I come here, the coyotes will notice me. A few times, there's I don't know, a few years ago, there was one up there howling. At least I thought it was a coyote. I don't know what else could do that. It looked like a coyote. I saw the Ace and Acme truck below there. So school has begun. My kids are back. The routine started. You know, we fall into that routine for the rest of the year with a few minor variations, but mostly it's the same routine. I get up 5 minutes before 6. I get my kids up at 6, make some breakfast. I have some nice thermoses, pack them up with ice, fill them up with water, give them to my kids. I feel like, you know, the Jetsons, you know, where they give Elroy the little bag for lunch. And then, you know, they get ready and all of that. Wow, I just saw like a really big blue fly, and it went into a hole in the ground, so I don't know, I'm gonna investigate that. So anyway, then I drop them off at the bus stop, and they go, and with a few short winks of the eyeballs, the year is over. The year is over. Last year was like that, the year before was like that, every year is like that. Although I will say, when I was younger, time seemed to go a little bit slower. I think the brain is emptier, and so you remember a lot more of your day, you remember a lot more of the year, so it gives the appearance that time is going slower. And then the older you get, you don't remember as much of the year. First of all, it's redundant, same old, so you're not going to remember duplicates. And then, you know, once you get up, I remember being a kid, I would get up and the day seemed long. I mean, you know, get out of school at 2:30, 2:20. I was going to say 2:30, 2:20. It was a long ways off from 8 o'clock. You began at 8, and you didn't think of it like, you know, oh, that's only 6 hours and 20 minutes. But it did seem like a big day. You know, if somebody said, oh, we're going to do something at 1, you're like, oh, that's a long time. But now it doesn't seem that long at all. You know, 1 o'clock rolls around, no problem. 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. It just flies by. And I remember when I was younger, somebody who was in their late 80s. They said to me, oh, if you think it goes by fast now, wait till you hit 80. It flies by. And I think because most 80-year-olds remember short bursts of time throughout the day. And it's just like, oh, yeah. Imagine if you had recollection that lasted minutes only. And then, you know, you would think about it again, you'd say, oh, a whole hour passed, and you don't really remember that whole hour, especially at the end of the day. And then the year goes by the same way. So I think the perception of time going faster is only because we don't retain as much of that time as we used to. But it's, you know, one of those things. I remember birthdays. Birthdays would take forever. When you were a kid, from one birthday to the next seemed like a very long time. Now, you know, you have a birthday, and then you know, you're getting ready for the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and then somebody who wants to give the impression like they don't care, they say, it's just a number. Well, it's a number that represents something bigger, like your aging process. You know, it's not just a number. It would be just a number if you didn't age at all. You know, like you were a vampire. You were like 80 years old, but you look like you were about 18. You behave that way in terms of, you know, ambition, endurance, flexibility, agility. But it's more than a number when it reflects your abilities, right? Very dry here. If I had Kool-Aid right now, and I don't mean a little 8-ounce glass, I mean like a 32-ounce glass with plenty of ice, I would drink it quickly. So yeah, very nice. A little breezy. I didn't bring my wind meter, my animal meter, and I see quite a few what looks like to me sunflower plants. There's quite a few of them. I don't know, maybe they're similar but not really sunflower. One thing, I don't mess around with mushrooms. You know, I know there's a lot of varieties that are edible when you're out in the wild, although I've never been that hungry where I'm out in the wild and I'm like, oh man, I could use a meal right now, but there's no El Pollo Loco, I'm just gonna have some mushrooms over here. Never that hungry, because I know that a lot of mushrooms are poisonous and they will take you out. They will take your life. Some of them will change this whole place into a cathedral, you know, if you have enough of them. So I don't mess around. You know, I'd have to be with an expert to eat a mushroom, and very hungry. But yeah, I see mushrooms and I go, that's probably the poisonous kind. Although I do have an app now, and one time that app saved me a big hassle. You know, one time the trail was kind of closed off where I was heading, and then I saw an opening, but the opening was full of vegetation. And I said, I'll just go through here, save some time. And I said, oh, wait a minute, I have an app. And I took a picture of the plants that were growing there, and they were all poisonous. They were all like poison oak, things like that. So I didn't go that way. And then another time, we were in the desert barbecuing, me and my daughter, and she found this plant, very colorful, and she grabbed it, she had it in her hand and everything. And I said, what is that? And I said, wait a minute, I have an app. So I took a picture of it, and it said that it contained, what was that, urusol or whatever, that oil that makes you break out like poison ivy has. So I said, yeah, throw that away. And I had rubbing alcohol, which alcohol strips oil. And I poured a ton on her hands. We had a towel, we did that a few times, removed all the oil, and nothing happened. No breakout, nothing. You know, even poison ivy, I used to get it when I was a kid. 7 years in a row. I don't know if that's a significant number in the plant world, but I got it 7 years, and badly. When I say bad, I mean badly. My eyes would shut, my face would, you know, my arms were full, my body, my back, everywhere was full of the boils, what do they call those? They're full of fluid inside, and I would get it bad 7 years in a row. And then it stopped. Even though I was doing the same thing, I didn't change anything, but I wasn't getting poison ivy anymore. So I don't know if I developed some kind of an immunity with my immune system not responding to it anymore, or I don't know what it was, but it was something, and I haven't gotten it now in decades. But you know, I used to get it, and I know what the problem was. We had a house where there was a bit of a small area, was kind of like bushes and all kind of stuff growing there. It wasn't even our property, that spot, but I would decide to go in there with my lawnmower and open up a trail. You know, the owners of next door, they didn't mind, they'd like the trail, but I would always break out in poison ivy because there was poison ivy in there. Now imagine going in there with a lawnmower, blades are spinning, poison ivy's being chopped up, all that oil is getting on you, and then about 2-3 days later I would notice there's a sensation you feel. It's a bit of an itchiness, it's some annoyance, and I'd say that feels like poison ivy again. And that happened 7 years when I was a kid, you know. And then all of a sudden it stopped. I think either 8th, 9th grade around there was my last time that I got poison ivy, poison oak, that kind of stuff. But with the exception of one time, I was working on a roof, garage roof. I was taking the shingles off, and as I was taking them off, they were falling off the sides, you know, which later on you got to, you know, grab them and throw them in the dumpster. So I removed all the shingles. The entire roof on one side, I almost fell through a couple of times because it was being eaten by carpenter ants. Every time I would remove the shingles, thousands of ants would pop up out of nowhere. And anyway, so I cleaned it all off. I removed all the rotted shingles, and we're talking here decades ago, but I threw them in between. Some of them fell in between the garage and there was a fence, so I had to go in there and take all that stuff out. Well, when I looked in there, I noticed that there was tons of poison ivy growing. Well, what am I going to do? I have to go in there now. So I went in there and I removed everything, and I did get it. I got it on my forearms a little bit though, but nowhere else, nothing else, and it lasted for a short period. So I feel like I have some kind of an immune protection. My immunity is like, may not be a 10, but it might be like a 9.7. You know, I literally have to jump on top of this stuff and hug it in order for my body to get even a little rash. Well, prior to that, even if it was close to me and I made eye contact with it, I would get an outbreak. So, and like I said, that was decades ago. But the last time I really got it bad was, you know, either 8th or 9th grade. I know definitely 8th grade I got it. And it was towards like springtime. We're taking end of year pictures, you know, graduation pictures for the 8th grade. And I remember I got hit with it, and it was all my face and horrible, overwhelming, you know. And I'm like, I gotta take pictures like this, will be a great memory. But so it was the only time I actually went to a doctor for poison ivy, and he looked at me, he's like, wow. He goes, you got it bad, And I go, is there anything? I thought he was going to say, hey, calamine lotion, whatever that crap is. It doesn't work at all. That's, anybody tells you calamine or whatever it's called, they're giving you bad advice. That does absolutely zero. It may reduce the itching by 0.1%, if that. But in terms of making it go away faster, it does a big fat goose egg. It does nothing. Waste of money. You know, it's an old ancient remedy. But it does nothing. So anyway, he goes, I'll give you something. So he pulls out his little prescription booklet and he starts writing with his fancy cursive. And I said, oh, I'm glad he's giving me something. So I go to the pharmacy and they give me a tube, and I go, all right, I'm going to start putting this on. So I was in bad shape. I said, you know what I'm going to do? Tomorrow, school pictures, I'm going to get up every 2 hours and I'm going to put it on. And so what I did is I set my alarm, so I was getting up every 2 hours. I would go to the bathroom and put the cream on, you know, rub it in nice and, you know, hard, and then I would go to bed, wake up 2 hours later, do it again. And each time I was getting up, I was looking in the mirror and I couldn't believe the difference. So by the time 7 o'clock rolled around, I was satisfied with the way I looked. I was like, yeah, that looks, 95% better. And all the boils, all the bumps, everything had disappeared. The only thing that was left was a bit of a reddish, like redness. That's all. So I washed up and everything. I went to school, took the pictures, and if you see the pictures today from my 8th grade class there, you don't know I had poison ivy. It looks like maybe I stayed out in the sun for a few minutes, and even that, not really. Very, very light redness. That's from the irritation. But everything, my eyes were good, everything was fine, the eyelids, all that stuff had gone. And I always recommend that cream. I always recommend somebody gets it. I go, well, they have similar creams, but I tell them, you got to get that style. And they go and they ask for it and they get it and they make the stuff disappear. But yeah, I was very happy that he actually recommended something, because I remember other times they'd say, put a calamine lotion on there and you'll be fine. And except for that time, I wouldn't do anything. I would just, shower and, in cold water, cool water. And that would be it. But that time, I decided, what, I want to try and get rid of this stuff. And they gave me something that actually, worked. And I have no idea why they don't allow that stuff over the counter. Are people going to overdose with that stuff? You can overdose with Tylenol or, any other medication that's over the counter. You go to other countries like overseas in Europe and even Mexico here. They trust people more with the medicine there. You can get high blood pressure medication over the counter. You can get creams like that over the counter. There's a lot of things that are over the counter there that over here you need supervision. You need supervision here like we're 5. So they treat us like babies sometimes because they're really the babies and they don't trust themselves, so they have to do that for all of us. But I think if it said something like, you can buy this stuff over the counter, you just need to talk to the pharmacist for a couple of minutes, 99% of the people will use it the way it's prescribed. What am I going to do? I'm going to eat the cream, and then go, I didn't know. I didn't talk to a doctor ahead of time, Pharmacists can look at you, and now especially with apps, I'm sure that there are apps that can diagnose skin conditions. They say, oh yeah, you got poison ivy, or you have some allergic reaction, this is what I'm going to give you, because it's all the same stuff. Anyway, got a bit of a breeze going here. Microphone picks up everything. I got a mic, I have a mic that reduces, but when I hear it after, you can still hear the wind in there. So anyway, I'm gonna go now. I'm a little bit hungry and definitely thirsty, so probably get a big beverage. That's it for now. Ciao.